What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today we are going to be talking about 3 must-start and 3 must-sit running backs in your fantasy football leagues. So without further ado, let's talk about the guys that I am starting in my fantasy football leagues. And we're going to be starting with Bengals running back Joe Mixon. Now the Bengals do play on the road this week against Cleveland, and the game total is set at 47.5 points. And Joe Mixon currently holds the 3rd highest odds to score an anytime touchdown in this matchup. His total yards line is set at 79.5 yards in favor of the over, and he has a receptions line set at 3.5 receptions. Now the Browns do tend to land somewhere around league average against the running back position, so I don't expect this to be a very tough matchup for Joe Mixon. And I do think that if you do plug him into your lineup, you can expect low-end running back 1 numbers from Mixon in this matchup against the Cleveland Browns this week. Now the second player that I'm going to be starting in my leagues this week is going to be J.K. Dobbins of the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens have a home game this week where they will be playing against the Houston Texans, and their game total is set at 43.5 points in favor of the Baltimore Ravens in what is likely going to be a blowout. So this does favor J.K. Dobbins because they likely just go to the run game in the second half of this matchup. Now J.K. Dobbins does have the highest probability to fall into the end zone in this matchup, so obviously very good for your fantasy football teams if he does find pay dirt. And his total yards line is set at 74.5 yards, which is in favor of the over as well, so obviously good things for fantasy football. The only thing we don't like for J.K. Dobbins is that his receptions line is set at 1.5, which is in favor of the under, so obviously we're not expecting a lot out of him in the passing game, but I don't think it's going to matter if he does find the end zone and he is getting that rushing work there in Baltimore. So with all of those factors being taken in consideration, a blowout that's going to favor a game script where J.K. Dobbins is going to run a lot, a Texans defense that is still going to be a very bad defense in the NFL this season, I think you can plug J.K. Dobbins in your lineups and expect high-end running back 2 numbers from him this week against the Texans. Now my third and final start of the week is going to be a little bit of a deeper play. It's going to be Rachaad White from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. White and the Bucs are going to play on the road against the Minnesota Vikings this week with a game total that is set at 46 points in favor of the Vikings, but I don't think that that's going to matter for Rachaad White for fantasy purposes. Where I can see White being valuable for this team in your matchups this week is going to be in the receiving game. Baker Mayfield has one of the highest check down rates in the NFL last season, and if they do get down early in Minnesota, I do think that they will start leaning on Rachaad White in that receiving game as they try and catch back up on the scoreboard. Rachaad's total yards line is currently set at 72.5 yards, and the Vikings defense still projects to be somewhat of an easy matchup for running backs. And I think if you plug Rachaad White into your lineups this week, you can expect mid-range RB2 numbers from him, and you could probably play him over some guys that you maybe drafted higher than him in your fantasy football drafts. So now that we've talked about some guys that I'm starting, let's talk about the guys that I'm sitting or looking at playing other guys over them. And the first guy we're going to be talking about is going to be Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Najee and the Steelers have a home game this week against the San Francisco 49ers, and the projected game total is set at 41.5 points, which is one of the lowest in the NFL this week. With that being said, Najee does have the 2nd highest odds to fall into the end zone, so if he does end up falling into the end zone, he may be able to salvage this week. But when looking at his total yards line, it is projected at 63.5 yards, and he is favored to go under that line as well. He's also projected 1.5 receptions, which he is also favored to go under that line. The Niners have one of the best defenses in the NFL, so this projects to be a very tough matchup for Najee Harris, and I think that if you do plug him into your fantasy football lineups this week, you shouldn't be expecting anything more than low-end RB2 numbers, and I'm sure there are players on your team that you drafted after Najee that I would prefer playing over him this week for fantasy football. Now the second player that I'm avoiding if possible in my fantasy lineups this week is going to be Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans. Going back to that matchup we talked about earlier, the Texans are going to be on the road in Baltimore this week, and like I mentioned earlier, that projected total is going to be at 43.5, heavily in favor of the Baltimore Ravens as they are projected to blow out the Texans this week. Now the problem with this is that Dameon Pierce currently has the 8th highest odds to score a touchdown in this matchup, so obviously not very good when your probability of scoring a touchdown is the 8th highest in a NFL game, and he has a total yards line set at 73.5, favored for the under, and a receptions line at 2.5, favored for the under as well. So obviously not ideal when all of your projected lines are favored for the under in a matchup where you're not expected to be competitive. With the Ravens projected to dominate this game and having a very good defense, the Texans may have to abandon the run game early if this game does get out of hand. And if you choose to play Dameon Pierce this week, I wouldn't be expecting anything more than fringe RB2 numbers from him in your lineups. Now the third third and final guy that I'm going to be avoiding in my fantasy lineups this week is going to be James Cook, running back for the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are going to be playing in a tough divisional matchup against the Jets in New York this weekend, and the projected game total is set at 45.5 points, slightly in favor of the Buffalo Bills. Now, James Cook is currently ranked 4th in the highest odds to score an anytime touchdown in this matchup, and his total yards line is set at 62.5 yards in favor of the under, and his receptions number is set at 2.5, also in favor of the under as well. The New York Jets have one of the best, if not the best, defense in football this season, and like I said, this projects to be one of those lower scoring, tough divisional matchups that we sometimes see from time to time. And I could see a situation where if the Buffalo Bills get a lead in this game, they start leaning on Dameon Harris, who has been brought in to have the early down grinder work, where they could chew out the clock in this matchup against the Jets. If you choose to play James Cook this week, I would only consider plugging him in my flex spot, but I am sure that there are plenty of other options that I would rather have play over James Cook as a flex, and I wouldn't expect anything more than flex numbers out of James Cook this week. Now, that is all I have for you guys today. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and give it a like. That is the best free way to show our channel some support. Also, if you would like to, go ahead and join our Discord. It is free to join. It gives you direct access to me, so you can ask me any start, sit, waiver questions, or any other fantasy football questions that you may have throughout the season. Like I said, that will be linked in the description. And if you haven't already and you want to watch more football content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 500. Hopefully we'll be hitting that today, and I will see you guys on the next video. I don't have anything else for you. Peace out.